Hi again. I don't know how this is going to work out because I'm on the boat and it's it's very much a work in progress in here. But I wanted to continue to tell you the story of the house I was born in and what Crystal Jane made of it when she looked at it. Well, sadly, she confirmed that the soldier who had died there had taken his own life. And I finished last video with saying about how I believe energies kind of gather in a place and affect that place. And Crystal Jane came up with some really interesting things that started me off in all kinds of different directions. And one of the things was that she discovered a further suicide. She started saying, there must be a tree nearby, there's a tree. I said, yeah, there's a tree nearby. So Google Map and so push the picture around the garden a bit and find the tree. And she said, yes, it would have been smaller and blah, blah, blah. And somebody hung themselves there, a young girl. So, as some of you know, who know me quite well, I often referred to my mother as a perpetual suicide. The first time I can remember her attempting suicide was when I was around 4. But it did continue all of her life. She did often find herself in a can't cope situation, I think would be fair to say. So it's all rather sad. And that concerned me because I began to wonder, and I'm still wondering, whether there was an energy there that brought this out in her and all the rest of it, and indeed in the soldier and perhaps in the girl. So that's sort of quite interesting. So now, suddenly we're into clearing some energies of a house. So I'll let you know how that goes, because I use Reiki, so I will work with Reiki to help clear that. And it seems that Jane picked up on the young soldier took his own life because he couldn't cope with the task he'd been given, and this is possibly why village rumours had it that his men didn't respect him. So myself and my brother and my sister were all actually born at home in that house. So none of us seemed to show any tendency towards suicide, thankfully. But, I do feel like that affected us, that story, because it was given to us so much when we were children. And certainly the room that it happened in, we always knew which room it happened in, and how the story of how the poor chap had fallen down the stairs after he'd shot himself. That room, by heck, I mean, it was given to me to sleep in, like, give the sensitive of the family the haunted room. She'll love it. Oh, boy. I lived most of my childhood in fear of this creepy, creepy atmosphere in this room. I never associated it with that poor soldier. But the atmosphere in that room, it was dreadful. It was dreadful. I used to escape from it as often as possible and move in and sleep in the other room. It was awful. So I was disturbed by that sense of gloom that was in that room. And I'm quite a happy sort of person as an individual. And it really bothered me. So I'm going to carry on my investigations and certainly going to do some lifting and raising and things to help energies lift there, because someone obviously lives there now, and I'm sure nobody would want negative energies to continue. The interesting thing, though, young Jane sits there and tells me it was flooded. Now, this contradicts everything that I've been told about my house, because one of the other interesting stories about the house I was born in is my father watched the house that had stood on that site burn down when he was a child, when he was a young boy. And then, you know, family myth, how very coincidental, how very strange, he ends up living there when he's a married man. So that's sort of quite interesting. And we always sort of thought of the house as a sort of phoenix, because it rose from the ashes of the previous one. And so Jane sits there saying, lots of water. And she was describing a single-storey house, which ours wasn't, obviously, a single-storey house with a cellar and half barrels of apples being stored down there. And she mapped out, without knowing the internal layout of our house that we lived in, she mapped it out, absolutely. This is the pantry, this is the, this, you know, she mapped the whole thing out. And then started to say, well, the old cellar would have been there, and the footprint of the house would have been there, and a door we had never opened. Our house had 3 external doors on it, and a door that I honestly can't remember ever opening, the side door from the scullery to the garden. I can't remember that ever being open. She said, well, there was a kind of a blocked energy because it was a wall of the old house. It's a kind of block because it had been a wall previously. And so she said she felt that the door wouldn't ever get used, and she would be interested to know if current people who live there actually, so would I, actually use that door. But anyway, so she went on to describe this little house, and she said water poured into the cellar. So I said, oh, you're probably picking up on my grandparents' old house down at Peasmarsh, because that indeed did flood after they left, because my grandfather had put on water to it from a spring, and nobody had turned it off when they left, and so the thing flooded, and the cellar flooded. My brother and I checked it out, 10, 15 years later, and it was still drip, drip, dripping down in there. So I said, oh, you're probably picking up on that. So left it. You know, our conversation went on, and we talked about a few other things. And suddenly I remembered the village I was born in was called High Halden. It's up on a hill. But the part we lived in... Oh, this is Isis. Do you want to go this way? I'm terribly sorry about this. Apparently we need to go this way. Go on then. Come on. Which way do you want to go? Oh, it's not Isis, it's Timber. My dog. So, it's called High Halden, and it was up on a hill. We didn't live up on the hill. We lived way down the bottom of a huge hill, and a couple of other little ones too, in a very low area, geographically low area. And suddenly remembered the village moved up to the top of the hill because the sea came in. So Jane, as I was thinking this, was busy saying, I don't think this was the house before your house, it was the house before that. So she's gone back sort of 3 houses to probably the time when the sea rushed in and wiped out the village of High Halden. So she's off now with lots of ideas and things of looking on the internet, trying to look up the history of the village, because she's very detailed in what she likes to research, what she gets psychically. So I was absolutely fascinated by the fact that she'd picked up on all those things. I mean, I've been around Jane a lot, and I know that she's very genuine with what she does, and her messages are, her findings are usually pretty accurate. It's just, you know, my poor memory and poor brain that doesn't catch up with things. And I think possibly that's true of anyone who goes for that sort of psychic reading. You sometimes just don't remember at the time. So it's to let you know that out of that reading came a couple of things for me that I thought were valuable. A, that my mother may not have been a suicidal person, but it was somebody being influenced by an energy around her. Equally, that could have been true for the soldier, could have been true for the girl, I don't know. I mean, you know, there could be all kinds of things going on. So I'm going to be doing some clearing and some Reiki, and see if that has an uplifting effect, see if the house looks different, because generally, if you clear energy, you things stop looking weird and out of shape. They begin to look loved somehow. Also, I'm going to try and do some research to find out the soldier, who he was. Jane only got a surname, so, you know, we'll have a look around in the village records and see if we can find something. So there's the clearing, trying to find out the chap's name, because he could have family around, and they might be interested in what was going on there. And also, I just think for my family, just, you know, because my brother and my sister also grew up there, they not interested in any of the things I do, but they might be interested in the historical side of things when I actually get around to doing some research. So it's a bye for now from me, and I'm going to sit here now and do some quiet Reiki practice and let you know how that goes. So bye for now.